Welcome to Flute Q&A number 23. With me, I am Jane Kavanagh. I'm a flute teacher. I'm Australian. I love showing people how to get faster progress with their flute playing through learning the tweaks of proper technique, the tiny tweaks that you can make to your flute playing that instantly make you sound better and make it a lot easier to play. Okay, we have 3 questions today coming to you from Ron, Ellie, and Ashley. They are all excellent questions, and hopefully I can give you, well, I think the answers are excellent, so hopefully you find the answers excellent as well. Okie dokie. The first question, Ron. Hi, Ron. I'm playing Fur Elise and having a hard time figuring out whether the notations covering multiple measures are slurs or phrase markings. You're not alone, Ron. Most comments on the internet seem to be somewhat vague. That's my point. Concerning how to tell the difference. Help! So, Ron, you're not alone. The reason it's the main reason why it's confusing is because Fur Elise is written for the piano. And Fur Elise, piano players do not need to breathe. Well, they need to breathe, but they don't need to breathe in the music. So you could have what looks like a slur marking to us that they would just call a phrase marking. Not a phrase marking, a marking of legato, and it could go for 2 minutes because they don't need to break those legato markings to breathe like wind players do. So when you have a look at flute music, 99 or more % of flute music, when you see a slur that you're talking about or a phrase marking, it's specifically slur. And if you want to breathe and not break that slur, you need to obviously wait to the end of the slur. I had a look at the Flute Tunes version of Fur Elise for you, and the slurs in this are logical for flute players. So I'll put a link in this under your question in case you, Ron, or anyone else would like to play Fur Elise in a way that's clearly been edited by a flute player. So it's going to make it easier for you to learn. So sometimes the markings that you see are legato markings and sometimes they are slur markings, especially if it's not a wind instrument that you're playing. And they can really make that decision. It's kind of like a hierarchy. So a slur is simply articulation. And then above it, they'd be like, okay, well, we actually want the phrase to be quite long, but with individual like mini phrases or articulation, as in slurs, underneath that phrase. So they can say there's a big phrase, but we want sort of mini phrases in it. And that's how they do it, with a big, long, what looks like a slur, and then smaller slurs as well. Sometimes you see this in flute music, and you just have to go, okay, well, clearly we can't breathe and not breathe at the same time. Clearly we can't slur and not slur at the same time. So you just use your musical judgment and go, okay, this is, no one's examining me on this. It's for me to play and for me to feel expressive with how I play. So you look at what you're playing and how it feels and what you're capable with your breathing, and you make it work. And I was just thinking I should probably play a bit of Fur Elise for you, because otherwise you're thinking, what's a Fur Elise? Not you, Ron. You know what Fur Elise is. I've got it on my computer over there. Okay. But I can't bring my computer over. Ooh, what should I do? I might actually pause this video. I'll print it out and then I'll play you a bit of Fur Elise so you can hear it. Okay, I've printed Fur Elise out. It is such a beautiful melody to play on the flute. Piano music doesn't always lend itself to flute well. This one does, because it's a clear melody rather than an interplay between the 2 hands on the piano, which doesn't translate very well onto the flute. Sounds like this. And if you don't know it by the name, you will by the sound. That is the very first thing that I have played on a Sunday morning, early on a Sunday morning. So that felt like a bit of a warm-up for me. Okay, so that was Fur Elise. The next question, excuse me a minute. Hope that wasn't loud. It was right under the microphone. The next question comes from Ashley. How do you play a really fast line on the flute? There was just banging in the background. I'm like, what is that? How do you play a really fast line on the flute? Sorry, it sounds like I'm thinking about the question. I'm not. I was thinking about, did I answer everything that I wrote down for Ron? And yes, I did. So I was multitasking then, not very successfully, obviously. Let me start that again. Ashley says, how do you play a really fast line on the flute? Okay, 3 parts to your answer, Ashley, because it's a really good question. Really good question. It's what everyone is, no. I was going to say that's what everyone is aiming for. It's more like it's part of learning the flute, learning to play faster and faster and be more fluid with your fingers. So the first thing that you need to do to make sure that your fingers are in a position to be able to play fast is make sure that you don't have tension in your body when you play. Now, the reason for this, a lot of people think they need to get rid of the tension in their fingers, or they can feel that their hands are tight. And they're like, I need to relax my hands. I need to relax my hands. The truth is, the tension is nearly always, like really, really, really nearly always. I'm tempted to say always, but we'll put a caveat in there. Nearly always coming from the rest of your body. For example, firstly, I think it's 24 to 28. 24 to 27 of the 45-day flute transformation, which is a course inside the Flute Academy, and it incrementally takes you through a little new technique for one a day for 45 days. And they're in groups. So day 24 to 27 is all about identifying and isolating and relieving the tension in your body. And then after that tension module, you go on to faster fingers, and it's in that order for a reason, because you need to do the tension removing first before you can even begin to speed up your fingers. So an example of what's in the tension module is I teach you how to identify tension in your shoulders specifically, because a lot of people have tension in their shoulders when they play and they don't realize it. They think, oh yeah, my shoulders, they don't look tight, they're not tight, but they're so used to having a tiny bit of tension in their shoulders that they don't even realize it's there. And that tension flows down your arms into, by the way, speaking of arms, this is what happens when you sit next to Lily's in a white shirt. So that's my mistake. The tension flows down your arms, regardless of Lily's, and into your hands and tightens up your hands. Now you're thinking, well, why would I be tight in my shoulders? Like, they don't feel tight. There's 2 reasons. If you, is there 2 reasons? Yeah, no, there's 2 reasons, but they're linked. So when you started as a kid, if you started the flute as a kid, you would have picked up this thing that felt really long. You're like trying to hold it up like this. Like imagine that it's like really long for your hands. You're trying to hold it up. And no, there's no way a small human could relax their hands, their shoulders, arms, and hold up the flute like this. So they naturally do that. That sticks with you into adulthood. And that's exactly what happened to me as a flute player until I learnt to undo the tension in my shoulders in my early 20s with a really good flute teacher. They helped me identify that, and I had no idea it was there. The second reason that you have tension in your shoulders that I said is related, even if you started playing the flute as an adult, picking up a long tube and sticking it out to one arbitrary side, let's, choose the right because that's how the flute's designed, putting it up like this and then holding it there for a while you practice, you are going to get tension creep into your shoulders. And to give you an excellent demonstration, more like proof of how you feel when you started the flute, hold the flute out to the other side. Don't worry about where your fingers go. And hold it up and you'll be like, oh, that feels so awkward. It's very difficult to relax your shoulders and hold it out to the left because it just feels so weird. That's how you felt when you started the flute, sticking it out to the right side, the right. So there you go. That's proof as to why you probably have some residual tension in your shoulders and why you need to make sure you get rid of that before you even begin to try and speed up your fingers. And that, Ashley? Was it Ashley? Ashley or Ellie? No, Ashley. Ashley, that was only the first part of answering your question. The second part is you do specific exercises to speed up your fingers. Once you've got that tension out, you do specific exercises to push your fingers faster and faster. Some people would say scales. Scales are great, but it's not what you practice, it's how you practice it. It's not what you practice. Scales are great. It's how you practice your scales. So an example of faster fingers. So in the 45-day flute transformation that I mentioned, days 32 to 36 are exercises on speeding up your fingers. That module is called specifically faster fingers, and it comes after that tension module, as I mentioned before, to make sure you're set up to be able to play fast. A teensy little example of one of the faster finger exercises to help your fingers play faster is to identify the difficult passage that you're working on. You might think, okay, I've got this run of notes that needs to be fast, but in actual fact, your fingers can do all of it fast if you really look into it, except for 2 notes. So you might find these 2 notes and go, oh, that bit's the clunky bit. For example, you might have a run like, and you'll find that when you play it, there's always a bit of a lump or a bit of a sticking point at E to F sharp, because that is very awkward for your fingers to do this. So you pull that apart and you work on just going back and forward between E and F sharp, and you get that really, really smooth, really, really controlled, and really, really fast. And then when you put it back into your difficult passage, suddenly it's freed up this passage, because it's like you've dug in and found the troublesome bit, fixed it, and then gone back out and gone, okay, now the whole thing's fixed, and we only needed to fix that bit, not the whole thing. So that's an example of what you can do to speed up your fingers and make it sound a lot smoother. Now, the third part of the answer for you, Ashley, is... Oh my gosh, I almost forgot to tell you something really cool. Actually, in the Flute Academy, we have masterclasses where we have featured students who are students in the masterclass. It's all online. And I can see in their hands when they play in their masterclass recording, I can see that their hands shift when they play. For example, every time they're playing a G sharp, their whole left hand needs to move just a little bit, or their finger needs to move like this, instead of being primed to be over the G sharp and ready to go. That's another example, a really good example of how I can see very quickly why someone has slow fingers, because their whole hand needs to shift to every time they play a note. And it's not just G sharp, it happens with different notes as well. Okay, the third part of your question is, so inside the Flute Academy, there's a bonus course that you get called Mental Tricks for Faster Fingers. This is the third layer of speeding up your fingers. The first layer is removing tension. The second layer is doing the faster fingers exercises in the 45-day flute transformation. Specific flute finger, faster finger exercises. And the third level is the way you think about certain passages and how you can get them to become faster just by using certain anchor notes, by aiming to certain points, or tricking yourself into feeling like it's slower at the hard bit and faster at the easy bit in a passage that you're doing, and you make it work. You make it musical, and you make it really fast sounding. You make it not fast sounding, you make it virtuosic sounding by using, like, I was going to say smoke and mirrors. It's not really smoke and mirrors, but using efficient practice, intelligent practice strategies, intelligent performance techniques to make it sound as fast as you need it when it's difficult to play. Okay, so that was the other thing I wanted to say, Ashley. The third question comes from Ellie. Does it matter whether one plays a low F sharp with the middle finger or the third finger of the right hand? Awesome question, Ellie. Just for clarification, this is what Ellie means. When you play F sharp down low with this finger, she's saying, can you just do it like this? Did you hear it was slightly weaker sounding and slightly flatter? It's very slight, so you may not have heard it over this recording. Now, Ellie said low F sharp, but it goes the same for the middle F sharp as well. Did you hear that was flatter? That was more obvious. And it also goes for the top F sharp. That was a little bit flatter. I think my brain just automatically pitched that middle one up to get it back in tune. But if you play it, you'll hear it's actually slightly flatter. I might do that for the other ones too, so you can hear the difference. Not much difference. It's there. So that is a little demonstration of the difference in pitch. But I haven't answered your question yet, Ellie. That fingering that you mentioned, the middle finger fingering, is a trill fingering on the flute. So if you trill from E to F sharp, you don't need to go. You just need to go, or oh no, I went to do the same up the top. I went, hang on, that's completely different fingering. That's really funny. I just confused myself. I didn't confuse myself. I just shocked myself. I went, wait, that doesn't work. I know I've mentioned the Flute Academy a few times, but there's a bonus course in there called the Ultimate Trill Guide, and it takes you through every specific trill fingering on the flute. That's why it's ultimate. Every trill fingering. And Ellie, that's not your question about trills, but I thought I would mention it because the fingering that you mentioned is specifically a trill fingering. Now, I still haven't answered your question. This is deliberately, not deliberately not answering. I wanted to deliberately give you some background on what we just spoke about. So I wrote some nice notes for you here. Middle finger, trill fingering. Oh, okay. So, right. Practice everything that you need to play going from with F sharps with the real fingering. Practice it with the real fingering. Now, do your absolute best to always use this real fingering. Always, always, always. And the reason for that is consistency with your brain, so that it doesn't need to make a choice between which fingering to use. It just automatically goes to the correct F sharp fingering. That's the main reason for using it correctly. Now, if you need to do a performance, it's coming up in a week or so, and you're finding a section moving from E to F sharps is difficult, use that middle fingering as a cheat fingering. But nearly every flute player in the world will say, no, don't do that. Use the real fingering. But I say, practice the real fingering so that you can ultimately always use the real fingering. But when it comes down to it, if you need to play a section in a performance and you just can't play it fast enough with that fingering, use the cheat fingering, which is the trill fingering. But only do it as like a last minute thing, so that you go, okay, I'll just do it for this performance and then I'm going to go back to the real fingering, because we want that consistency with that fingering for your brain, so that it always goes to the real fingering for F sharp and doesn't need to make a choice. Okay, there you go. Ron, Ashley, Ellie, it was so nice having your questions, and I'll see you in the next Flute Q&A. Bye.